Welcome to Sylvie TV, my YouTube channel. Today, I think whoever is English or British have noticed that I have never had done this setup here because I have a teapot and I have biscuits and cup of tea and a coffee. So maybe it's because I am going to interview a very, very important British young man. Today I have with me Brigadier Anthony Julian Stevens. Mr. Anthony Stevens, I call Dad. He is my husband, Giles Stevens' father. And I have the honor and the privilege to have him in person. We tried once to record a little bit about you, but it's not the same. So today we will have just a chance to have a heart-to-heart conversation, trying to bring back some memories, which is a treasure to me, to my children, and I'm sure you will enjoy as well listening a little bit. Welcome, Dad.
Thank you very much. I should correct you on one point.
Please do.
And that is that I'm not that important.
Oh, you are indeed. It's so interesting. He has only been a general in the British Army, so he's not very important. No, he doesn't have any history. Just wait and see. I think always tell here on my program, I say, everybody has a story and every story has its value. So yes, some people have this amazing story, but even if you have a little story, your story is valuable. So I'm so sure your story is very, very special to us.
Well, it's very kind of you to say so.
Well, let's try to say, like I said in the beginning today, when we were trying to think what would you talk about, why don't we start by you telling us a little bit of your background? I know a little bit, but if I make a question, I might just diverted it. But I would love you to share with us, who was your father? What did your father do? So that when we start talking about you, we know a little bit about your father, mother, and maybe your grandparents, because they as well bring some history.
Okay, gosh. Well, my father was also a military man, and I was born in Kenya.
Africa.
In Nairobi, and that was because my father was posted there. He served initially with the Somaliland Camel Corps. That was up obviously in North Africa, and so he left his fairly new wife to have my elder brother and me in Africa, while he went off first of all with the Somaliland Camel Corps, and then when it was converted to be more modernized than just camels, to have actually vehicles, it became the Somali Scouts. And so for the first part of the war, he was fighting against the Italians who wanted to take over Somaliland and Ethiopia. And
Ethiopia, I didn't know about Ethiopia.
Oh, sure. And then he came back, and he was then tasked to raising an African regiment of artillery, which he did, starting both in what was then southern Rhodesia, now as you know, in Salisbury, now Hooray, and then back up to Kenya, where he raised the rest of the regiment. Unfortunately, they were then sent to Burma, but they were on the troop ship from Mombasa out to Burma when they were torpedoed by a Japanese submarine.
Whoa.
And the ship sank in just over 2 minutes. And although father was rescued, he lost almost all of his regiment.
Oh my God, I have
over 1,000 soldiers lost their lives in that, which is pretty tragic. However, he then went on to Burma and was given command of some remnants of 2 other artillery regiments to fight the rest of the war in Burma. So that was father. His father was also a military man, but rather extraordinarily, he was born in Naples, as were his father and grandfather, because they emigrated to
Naples, Italy.
in Italy um, in the time of the Napoleonic Wars. And Naples was very important to the British Navy because that was where they would do their revictualling or their resupplies of food and ammunition. And so my great grandfather was made the British consul in Naples,
Wow.
and that's where the family then grew up. He did the very sensible thing of marrying a rich merchant's daughter out there.
Is that right?
And so that's where the family lived. But the boys were always sent back to a boarding school in England, whereas the girls weren't considered worth educating in those days.
Wow.
So they all stayed in Italy and married Italians, whereas the four brothers of my grandfather's generation were sent back to England. And two of those brothers decided then to return to being English, whereas the other two decided to go back and be Italians.
Wow. So you needed to choose in those days. You couldn't have two.
They did. But grandfather was very much, having been brought up in Italy, he was obviously bilingual. And so during the Second World War, he was broadcasting to the Italians from the BBC. And every evening he would do a broadcast telling the Italians exactly what was happening in the war. And he absolutely insisted that there were no propaganda issues or lies of any sort. It had to be the absolute truth. As a result, all the Italians began to respect him, and he became known as Colonnello Buonasera, which is Colonel Good Evening, because he used to start every evening with the words Buonasera. And,
Wow.
and so even the older generation Italians still know of him, and you can find him in Wikipedia if you like. So he was very much instrumental in converting the Italians to giving up with Hitler and coming on the other side.
Oh my goodness, it's history. It's history.
On my mother's side, she came from a Norfolk family, and
When you say Norfolk family, is a part of
that's
England.
east of England,
Yeah.
and they had, in generations, they had owned their piece of land for several hundred years. And in fact, going back, although she lived on the family estate when she was young, it truly belonged to her great uncle, who was a chap called John Rolfe, who actually was the guy who married Princess Pocahontas.
Oh my goodness me! That's why, you see? There is no history here.
And so,
Can you believe it?
and so, unfortunately, I mean, it's not a direct descendant because he was an uncle, but he brought her back to Norfolk, and she was presented to the king at the time and this sort of thing. But she didn't like England, and I don't blame her, because compared with Virginia, the climate was not particularly conducive to free and easy life. And so they decided to return back to the Americas. Unfortunately, she caught pneumonia, I think it was, as she waited for the ship to sail in Gravesend in London.
Oh my goodness.
And she died before the ship set sail. So she's now buried in Gravesend, and you can go and see her grave there, which is very sad. However,
very young. Yeah.
Well, she was quite young, but people probably more remember her for her romance with John Smith, another John. But that fell apart, and I can't remember quite the reason why. And she eventually married John Rolfe. But unfortunately, John Rolfe has a black mark against him because he was the guy that really was instrumental in starting the tobacco trade. And so he was sending shiploads of tobacco back to Europe. And of course, in those days, nobody knew about the health problems or anything like that. And they just loved smoking pipefuls of tobacco.
Yeah.
So enough said about John Rolfe.
Oh my God. Wow, but it's history. That's amazing. But carry on, carry on.
So, what can I say? My father, he was born in Cape Town, actually, in South Africa.
All because of the military.
All because of the military. But he was born in 1910, and of course, at the age of 4, the First World War started. Grandfather was in the army, so he was sent off, and in fact he was very much part of the war in the Dardanelles in southern Turkey, which was a particularly horrid episode of the war, and for which he was awarded a Distinguished Service Medal for that, and then shortly after retired. So I think that's family history. Mother, as I said, born in Norfolk. She met my father because he had a swashbuckling uncle who retired to Norfolk, and they used to go and stay with him. Met my mother there, and the rest is history, as
they say.
Yeah.
Wow. But then, Dad, there was something about your father that I still wanted you to tell us, because we were speaking just about him the other day. And besides this side of the history that he lost, there is something about languages. He was very good at languages. He used to speak several languages.
Yes, no,
He was very smart.
He was a clever man, completely unworldly. He wasn't very interested in making money or anything like that. He enjoyed his life, and he had a very good brain. So he did speak, I think probably 7 languages. All the European ones came naturally to him, but he also spoke Romanian and, of course, the African languages of Swahili and Afrikaans. And he used to just pick them up like that. But when you say that, some people say, oh, well, then he's a polyglot, meaning he spoke lots and lots of languages. But actually, I'd say, no, I'm a mathematician. And that's really where his brain talent was focused. So he did do a couple of inventions for the army, which relied purely
that's what I was trying to remember.
Mathematics. One was called the plotter, and it was all to do with artillery, and it was trying to make sure that the artillery shells landed exactly where you wanted them to go. And so one was this plotter, and the other was a thing called a correction of the moment graph, which measured air temperature and wind at various heights, and then did a clever calculation so that the shells were corrected and were not blown off course, if that could be put very simply. But of course, being a serving officer, he wasn't given the intellectual property rights for that sort of thing. Although eventually the great government awarded him £250, which
in those days,
well, it was, I suppose, quite a bit of money in those days, but a very small amount compared with what he might have got, because it was used in most Commonwealth armies. So
until computers came, you said. Until computer came,
yes, until yes, the great computer and chip came into being, which actually took the load off his fairly mechanical inventions.
Wow.
So that was him.
Wonderful, bless him. John Stevens,
that's
Mr.
him.
John Stevens.
Yeah.
But then, Dad, when it comes to you, I know you had, unfortunately, you had parents that went to live separate lives, and you went to boarding school, which was a natural thing for an English boy in those days. And it was the best that the parents think they were doing, was to send to boarding school.
Oh, sure. And certainly in our circumstances, as you mentioned, my parents split up. In fact, I never really knew my father for quite a long time. because he was off to Burma, and by the time we returned back to London, they had split up, fallen apart. And although I remember, at the age of about 6, this chap in uniform coming to see us and taking us out for the afternoon, I didn't really then have an emotional attachment to him. Although, as the years developed, I certainly did.
Yeah.
And we were very close in his last days. But boarding school, fairly natural for middle and upper class children to go. It was,
And especially in the military, was a way that
and
they
of
would.
course, in the military, when you were moving around all the time, for example, between the time my wife and I were married in 1965 and then when I retired in 1996, we had lived in 26 houses.
Whoa.
And so you can imagine if you were changing schools every time, your children would never get a decent education. So they sadly had to go off to boarding school. If I hadn't been in the military, I would tell you honestly, I wouldn't have sent them to boarding school, because you do miss a great chunk of their early lives and their development. And you can have a lot of fun with children who aren't at boarding school. There are advantages, of course. There's the continuity of education. And certainly in boarding schools, you play a lot of sport. You make very good friends over the years. For life, which I still have. And when it comes to leaving home, it's no difficulty. And I certainly found this as a soldier when we get raw recruits from places like Glasgow or Newcastle. Some of them had never been more than about 50 miles from their home ever in their lives. And
suddenly it was really hard.
Suddenly they were posted to a regiment. I mean, even if it was in another part of England, they were homesick. But if they were posted to, well, in my day, Hong Kong or Germany or anywhere else, that was a big step. And so they took a little time to settle in. Howsoever, I enjoyed boarding school. As I think I've told you before, we were raised as Roman Catholics. So I went to a Roman Catholic school, and in fact, a Jesuit school. And I enjoyed it. I was at boarding school for 10 years, and I enjoyed it. Yes, there were ups and downs. The Jesuits, by reputation, are very strict and would take out the cane as soon as look at you.
Oh my God.
Wasn't exactly the case. Yes, you did get beaten from time to time. That was almost a badge of honor to be thrashed from time to time. But I liked my school very much. I liked the masters. They were always very straight and encouraged argument, which is something that I don't think that teachers do so much these days. They did encourage you to express your opinions. And of course, to become a Jesuit, you do go through a very long period of training. So by the time you come out of the other end and become ordained as a priest, you are pretty well educated yourselves. So that actually is an added bonus if you need a schoolmaster.
That's right.
And in fact, I mean, a lot of it I owe to them. I mean, in my early years, we had a wonderful master who was a great lover of poetry and music. He was also our choir master, among other things. And he was the one that gave me the love for writing songs and doing...
Is that right? Because I was going to ask if it was from your parents that you got the musical kind of...
Father was musical, and he used to play the piano terribly.
But at least he did.
He had big hands like I did. So he could spread his hands across 8 white notes without any trouble at all. And so his right hand was good, very complex chords. His left hand was non-existent. So he used to use it as a sort of bass drum. He'd just sort of go plonk, plonk, plonk. not really
can
knowing
resolve.
where he was going. Um, and so, I mean, he was musical. He loved music, but of a sort of very traditional style.
Yeah.
Um, and so, Noel Coward songs, traditional jazz, musicals, Edith Piaf, these sorts of things.
Edith Piaf, La Vie en Rose.
He would love classical music. Yeah, all that. And in fact, I still had the old Bakelite records. They weren't even vinyl in those days, of Edith Piaf and other sort of
I like her.
other things. Noel Coward, of course, I grew attached to because he's so clever with words, and I just love that.
Yeah, I think that's what I admire a lot in you, because your songs, because he's a composer, and it's not just like a repetition of the same word all the way through. You literally pass a message, a story. You make you to dream through your song. You know, by the time you finish singing, you wow, you kind of have a knowledge of things.
Well,
It's admirable.
I hope. What I like is writing songs is to tell a bit of a story. So it's not just that I love you and I'm going to stay with you forever and ever and ever. It's going to be a bit more than that. Even if some of them are a bit blue, I suppose. But at least, you know, they do have an underlying message.
Yes, underlying message, for sure. But then we were talking about like one of your masters that he motivated you into music at boarding school. That's where we stopped, because we were talking about, so you were influenced towards music because he was a good writer with the songs, and that inspired you.
Yes, he was very clever at writing lyrics, but he was also our choir master, and every year we used to put on a Gilbert and Sullivan show at school.
Really?
And as a little alto, I played various parts, including the part of Iolanthe, which you would hardly believe to look at me now.
Oh, wow, I would believe. Of course I do believe in you. I admire you more than you think I do.
Yeah.
Well, we are recording here in the middle of a storm. Se quiser levantar e ficar mais perto, pode ficar, tá? We are in the middle of a storm here in Brazil, but I hope that's not going to affect our microphones here. But we are now just getting a little bit closer to the reality in our days for your more recent years, because then you just said you met Mom, which is my mother-in-law, the mother of my husband. But before you...
At university, studying chemical engineering. But I played a lot of rugby.
You were a very sporty man.
And had rather a good time. So my results weren't terribly good. I won't tell you how bad they were.
No, don't worry. It's past.
But at that stage, I decided, well, in fact, I didn't really decide. I was at home in West Sussex at the time, and every Saturday, those of us who were around used to meet in a pub in Chichester, the White Horse. And I went in there one Saturday morning, and I saw two friends that I didn't know them terribly well, but I knew them. And they all looked rather smart, and their haircuts were very short. And
caught your attention.
And I thought, what's going on here? So I said, oh, what's with the haircuts? And they said, oh, we've joined the army. We're at the Royal Military Academy of Sandhurst. And I said, oh, what's that all about? And they said, oh, well, we're going to become officers. And I said, well, what's it like? And they said, well, it's a bit like boarding school, but it's lots of fun, and we play a lot of sport. And what's more, we get paid 15 shillings and sixpence a day, which in today's money is about 75p.
Wow.
And so...
Very appealing.
So I thought, that's the life for me.
It's amazing how...
And that afternoon, I joined the army.
Can you believe it? So you were around 18, 17 and 19?
I was then, I was 19, nearly 20.
Wow.
And,
Can you
And so I then had to write to my father. My father was actually serving in the British Embassy in the Congo at the time. So, I mean, we had no direct communications, no possibility of telephoning even. So I had to write him and say, "Dear Dad, you'd like to know that I've left Manchester University and am now going to the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst."
Well, I get this.
And actually, very kindly, he wrote back and said, "I never encourage you to join the army because you have to make up your own mind on these things. But I'm delighted that you have."
Oh.
So off I went, joined the army.
Oh my goodness, what a very handsome young man there in the army. I'm not surprised my mother-in-law
No,
was caught. Tell us a little bit
I
what you remember.
don't know why she was hooked. But
I have pictures of you as a young man, very good looking.
well, I'm not sure about that. However, I do say I've got some good-looking children, and that makes up for it.
But before we talk about your marriage, you did have a wonderful older brother, not too older than you, and which is Uncle Henry.
Yeah.
Would like to mention him here. He's very
Yes,
special.
I miss him terribly. I mean, he died 3 or 4 years ago now, but he was actually a bit like your husband. He was the ultra sportsman. He wasn't very good academically, but he was brilliant at any sport that he took up. So he was very good. He played first-class rugby. He was a good tennis player. He played cricket for the county. And if he picked up a tennis racket without very much practice, he would give a good account of himself, and so on. But later in life, when he was about 40, he had some stables at his house, and somebody he knew asked if he'd like to be able to house some polo ponies. And he was a very good horseman as a young man too, but that led him into the polo world.
Wow.
And he was, at the age of 40, you can't be what they call a high goal or a high handicap player, because they won't let you. But of course, he was terribly popular, if you understand the polo world, because he didn't have much of a handicap. They used to love him playing on their teams because it gave them an advantage, because he certainly played above his scoring, as it were.
Wow.
But he was also brilliant at raising and training polo ponies. So people used to want his ponies once they'd been trained. And to his credit, he was able to sell ponies to Argentina. And that is exceptional, because
Wow.
most people go to the Argentine to buy polo ponies from there.
Take it out,
'Cause
yeah.
they're- So,
Wow, that
so he
shows.
was very good. And then when he was sort of retiring from active playing, he became an umpire, a high goal umpire, which is sort of international standard, and would go around the world umpiring, in big polo matches.
Amazing.
But he was also such a charismatic guy.
I loved meeting him.
And he could have anybody feeding out of his hand. He was just one of those people.
Generous, kind. I have great memories of him, and also we have Julian and Jewel and
Yeah.
his daughter as well.
Yeah, Gabby.
Gabby, and I think it's good to mention people that it's part of our heart and part of our story, And
Yeah.
because we're talking about your stories, it's not.
Yeah.
We are our brothers. We are our parents. We are the result of all people around us. So I need to put just a little pause now, and we are going to come back. I want to check how our cameras are doing, because sometimes I keep talking and then the guy give me a sign that he needs pause, so I never know. But then we carry on in a minute.
All right.
Só tô checando para ver se precisa de pôr pausa para você começar. Ou tem como começar do zero de novo, não? Deixa, continua?
Pastor, a senhora tem que, tipo assim... Já fez 30 minutos.
Mas o dele é podcast.
Não, não tem problema não. Só que eu te falando, tipo assim, que deu 30 minutos, eu disse, parou, e eu disse aqui de novo, entendeu? Agora vai 8 minutos, entendeu? Vai 38 minutos.
Eu tenho,
Não,
eu tenho
agora
mais
a senhora
22,
pode gravar 20 minutos mais.
20 minutos mais. Então tá bom.
Pode,
Alright.
pode.
Yep. It's because the camera every 30 minutes it gives a pause and then it starts again and I
Okay,
sometimes
yeah,
like
it's to sort of charge itself up again.
yeah. Meu bem, aí você pode chegar mais perto por causa do som, pode ficar assim, não dando para atrapalhar ali.
Não,
Você,
não tô dando.
você pode chegar mais perto dele por causa tá ainda ao vivo? Então tá. Ok, ready? Então, de volta, sorry, in English. So I'm really enjoying, I mean, we are literally on the outskirts of a story here. We could record for hours and hours and days because I want to put this program on the 24th of January, which is a very special day of the year for you.
Well, I don't know about special, but it will be my birthday. And I hesitate to tell you what number that birthday is.
It's so funny that because when I first met you, just before I got married, you were 59 years old.
Was it really?
But that means just the other day.
Yeah.
So you're still young. Only something happened between. You had grandchildren and not great grandchildren yet, but grown up
I don't think so,
grandchildren.
no. Well, actually, I mean, sort of reflecting on my life, and in fact Judy's life, we are part of the very lucky generation. Because, okay, I was very young during the war, but after the war, there has been relative peace. Yes, there have been wars here and there, but as far as we're concerned, certainly in England and elsewhere, life has been peaceful. We have, by and large, been healthy. We've had 3 very healthy, robust children, all doing their own thing.
Robin, Jaius,
And
Lulu.
Lulu, and 9 very healthy and equally robust grandchildren. So you can't really ask for much more, can you?
Oh, that's
And
wonderful.
so that's going. So 24th of January, and I've never met anybody else in the world who's shared my same birthday. Unlike you, who've got 3 members of the family in the same birthday. Yeah.
Well, it's always mom. She's twin, and also she has a grandson on her birthday.
Oh, that's
so
true.
that's
Yeah.
right. Well, the thing is, that shows how special you are. You have a day just for yourself.
Right. You think so? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but then I would like to mention your oldest, alias, you had an older brother than you, and then you had Penny.
Penny, my sister, who was
Sister.
2 years younger, and who now lives in Spain, and she
Lucina
lost
and
her
William.
husband.
Yes,
She
I
lost
met-
her husband a few years ago, and he was a delightful, inquiring sort of chap.
they
And
was-
then they've got 2 children, William and Lucinda,
Lucinda. They are lovely.
and they're good and they're bright, but also mentioning Henry and his 2 children, because his wife Jeanette died 2 or 3 years ago. But Jeanette is very, very bright. She was a project manager for McKinsey's, which is a very important management consultancy firm, in her mid-20s, and has gone on, and she's married a very bright guy, Gabby, and her 2 children are very bright, which always surprised me, because Brother Henry academically wasn't so bright, but he made up for it in many other ways, as I've said.
But that's what we know about individuality, isn't it? Sometimes we measure people's intelligence or people's influence by what they studied, but actually, it's an opportunity some people have to study, but some
Advised at the age of 15 that she was never going to achieve academic brilliance and shouldn't go on to take further exams after the GCSEs.
excuse me,
But I left school, traveled around the world, met her now husband, got a scholarship to Berkeley, California, and got what was equivalent to a first honours. So you never know.
My sister, I love her. And she's brilliant in everything she does.
Yeah.
She's a natural leader, beautiful heart, caring for the poor. I remember the first thing I heard of her in London was that she would go and get food for the homeless and things like that. She's constantly she's paying attention in everything. You know, she's around her. She's a brilliant mother. She's a wife, but she's constantly remembering. I can see, even if it's a little thing, she's the one who responds message. I don't know. She has a beautiful heart, and she's very smart and very pretty.
Also a very good director of school musicals.
That's what I was going to say. She's so good at just dealing with teens, dealing with young people.
Mothers said, having listened to rehearsals, told her, Lulu, we could never use that sort of treatment of the children like you do.
Otherwise, we would
be in trouble. You get away with it because you have an English accent.
Good for you. You see? No, she knows I admire her. She knows I love her. But that's I was so happy to hear you saying that you understand that the treasure in life is to have the family, to see your children's children flourishing, and you have been here with us for this past 3 weeks, and not a perfect family, far away from that, but we are so grateful that you and Mom stuck together, because I know your parents were not able to be together because different reasons, but we know marriage itself is not that easy to hold on. We see there's lots of sacrifice, but I think when a father and a mother makes a decision, I think you did lots of decisions, moms as well, just to stick together, and now to be able, to have Mom and Dad together coming to see us. I think we are very blessed and very privileged too.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to realize that I don't think there's such a thing as a perfect marriage, inverted commas, because, I mean, we've been together for 58 years, which is an awful long time. And, and sometimes your partner can really annoy you. And so you can squabble. Sometimes I think we squabble like children in a nursery.
Oh, we do.
That's part of life.
Part of life.
And you just have to think, what's the alternative? And for me, the alternative is unthinkable. So
it's true. Yes, and then there is its reward eventually,
Sure.
Companionship and being there. I mean, I love just seeing you two holding hands and caring for each other. Quickly go prepare her cup of tea, and I think this is little things that you don't realize how much you are inspiring us, the younger generation. Because in our days, like you say, many people just they teach like, oh no, each one just he has hands, he can help himself. The new teaching in our days is like individualism. There's no kids companionship that, because people say, well, the woman cannot be just in the kitchen, needs to be doing all the things. But I think nothing can exchange the place of caring. It's different from feeling that you are used and abused as a woman, because you're a woman, you are only working hard and the other man is just going making money. But there is the moment where the caring for each other, that's more than just a position or even like a ideology of our days regarding to marriage and regarding to relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there is a bit of effort that's needed in order to keep that afloat. And it's, as I said, it's not been easy. I think one of the important things in life is to give your partner their own space, and that particularly refers to the wives, because they do need to have continual intellectual stimulation, whether it's through work or whatever. And I suppose one of my regrets from Judy's point of view is because she was very academically bright, but her parents, for one reason or another, didn't let her go on to do tertiary education, and considered that she was good enough doing a secretarial course and become a secking, which later in life she proved, particularly after I retired, that she was worth very much more than that in the jobs that she held down. And that being in the army, that was really quite difficult to do, certainly in those days when you were traveling the world. It's less difficult now because most of the British Army is back home.
You have the technology as well that you can have access to study.
No, I think to have that sort of stimulation, as well as raising kids, can be a good thing. But I would disappear off for months at a time, so there had to be somebody at home.
Yeah.
And so she had to sort of
sacrifice
be the stay-at-home mum. Having said that, of course, in those days, and I mentioned the fact that sometimes young soldiers, recruits, even lots of them with young wives, needed a bit of motherly care, a sort of somebody who would be checking up on them, going around, making sure the wives, particularly when the soldiers were all away, had their morale kept up by organising various activities and so on, and just literally going round visiting them, having cups of tea. So that was, in a way, her employment, although I hasten to add, she didn't get paid for it.
But that's what I love in mom. She's constantly, she's at the age now in her 70s, and she comes to Brazil, and people are really impressed that she can literally communicate in Portuguese with most of the people she sees. I mean, how many people that after 50, they just think, oh, I can't learn another language anymore, it's too hard for me. She just have this eager to learn things and to improve. So anyway, I am fan of you too, very much so. And I'm so privileged to be part of this family for 23 years already.
Oh my goodness, is it that
It's
long? Well, I
nearly,
suppose it must be.
yeah, it's nearly half of my life has been with you. But one thing that we really love about you as well is the musical side that you brought, to the house. We have this just life is, in our house here, we just brought from what we learned from you of entertaining. Wherever people come to our house, they always will go away. They heard us singing a song. People just already know us by the Stevens family, who loves their music, who loves singing. And you brought that. From the first moment I met you, like you said on my birthday, music was there between us. It was a connection because I saw a guitar, we pick up the guitar, we sing a song. And not only that, but you recently, not too long ago, wrote a musical, and it's been there, or two musical.
Yes, actually, it went a little bit before then, because I used to write reviews, musical reviews. These were entertainments, I suppose, very often with a common theme, but with jokes and sketches interspersed with musical numbers, either dance routines or solos. And funny enough, I did that most of my army. And to be honest, it all started when I was a very young officer, and we were going to have a regimental ball. So it was a very formal thing with everybody dressing up in the smart uniforms and so on. And about a week before the ball, my commanding officer called me and said, we've got this ball. I want you to produce an entertainment. And I thought, goodness me, what do I do? So I went away, scratched my head, and I wrote it was only about 20 minutes, half an hour worth of entertainment, which was, I think, 3 songs interspersed with a few jokes. And with fear and trepidation, I got up after the dinner to do this sketch. But to my relief, people started laughing and clapping. So I thought, oh, this is all right. And for some reason, my reputation spread, and I started being invited to do similar things with other regiments.
And that
So
was
that's
a
how it
challenge
all-
that helps you
So,
to.
so that started it. I thought, well, if I can amuse people, and actually, there's nothing better as a tonic than having people laugh at stuff
You'd
you've
say or
written.
you sing, yeah.
So
Or
that's how
cry,
it all started.
or cry, because sometimes it's good to
Oh,
see
you know,
people cry as
No,
well.
well,
Oh.
this last musical was about the homeless, and I did try to bring sort of laughter through the tears, but always there was a message there about the plight of the people who are living on the streets, and it seemed to work. I mean, it played only for a week in the theatre in my hometown, but we had full houses every night, and I would like, when I get a moment, to then maybe take it somewhere else. But what was particularly gratifying was that all people enjoyed it, and there were some very humorous moments in it. A lot of the people, and I was standing by the door as people came out, and they came up to me and said, "That's got us thinking," and that's entirely what it was supposed to do.
Exactly.
And so I hope people look upon the homeless with a little bit more understanding. I'm not saying
And they have a world, isn't it? So, because when I watched it, I just could identify, because I worked with some homeless in London. One of my first mission work in London was with the homeless. And as you know, I love listening to people's story. So I would sit next to somebody, and then he said, so before you were here, don't know, what did you do? What? And then you have this long story of life that is not, the person just jumped there. There is something happening then to take her there. She still remains somebody with a soul, with emotions. And
yes, I mean, you're absolutely right. And what I've discovered, because I didn't just sit down and write about homeless, I talked to lots of them. And the thing that was really, to me, brought home was more than giving them some money, they loved to talk, because they're by and large very lonely people. So for somebody to spend even 5 minutes of their time just chatting, normally about their disasters, and most of them are disasters. Some of them you have to say, come on, chaps, you could probably, get yourself together a bit. But mostly not. They've just sort of slid down and
couldn't get out.
Yeah.
It's true. But Dad, I know we need to try to close our time, but I have so many other things I wanted to mention. But I wanted just to mention your other sister, your younger sister, because we didn't mention her name, in Scotland.
Oh, Ali.
Ali.
She's a half-sister. She was my mother's second marriage. And she's a great girl. She was an international equestrian competitor. So she rode in the same British team as Princess Anne, for example.
Wow.
And she won a couple of really major competitions. And still today teaches and judges dressage, which is a particularly highly skilled form of equestrianism. But she lives in Scotland, as you said. They have
It's a beautiful setup there.
It's a beautiful setup, but it's all her own hard work. Because when she got married, she discovered that instead of her husband being as well off as he might be, he was actually very heavily in debt. But she, through her own energy and vigor, has sort of made
managed
the place
to at least to hold on
to sort it out. And so it's really quite a buzzing business now. And the wonderful thing about her actually is that her staff, who work quite hard, adore her. They think
That's a
she
good sign.
is the business. And I think that's really good.
Every time we've been there, it's been such a good memories for
Yeah.
us little children. And now she's a grandmother of twins. Is that
Yes,
right?
she is. 2 little boys, yeah.
Love to Ali and her family and the boys and girl. But then that, so you now live in England, in the UK, but you have older son, Robin Stevens, who married an Australian girl and lives in Sydney.
That's
So
correct.
for you to meet, to visit your son, you need to leave England and travel how many hours to Australia?
I suppose it's about a 24-hour trip, but we now normally
Stops.
we stop in Perth because you can fly direct from London to Perth in Western Australia in 17 hours. That's a long flight,
It's a long flight.
but it's actually better than stopping off in Singapore or somewhere and then
Waiting
getting on
and-
another plane. And so I've got a cousin there, and so we normally spend a couple of days with her, sort of recuperate a bit from jet lag, then fly across to Sydney,
Wonderful.
which is another 6 hours. But there we
Wow,
go.
that's Australia for you.
Yeah.
And then he's married to Natalie and have a daughter,
They have
Yeah.
daughter Charlie,
Charlie, gorgeous
who's
girl.
tall and
Very
very
pretty.
good looking, I have to say, and quite a sports girl, should I say, sports person,
Yeah.
whatever the modern parlance is. And is very good at
Yeah.
touch footy and
Oh,
netball and things like that.
Wonderful.
But
Yeah.
a great lover of swimming, and of course Australia with its
She's
beaches.
in the right place.
And her school is only a short trip to Bondi Beach. So where does she go after school most days?
Never mind. Important that she's doing something
Oh, yeah.
special. But then for you to see your youngest daughter, she's married to a Jewish American man
Yeah.
who lives in California.
That's right.
San
And
Francisco.
they have 4 like you,
Joe, Benji,
and then
Elsa
Elsa
and Zoe. So you travel another how many hours?
That's a
Just-
short trip. That's only about 11 hours.
Just about 11 hours.
But I mean, they're lovely too. Their children are very healthy and active. which
Very
is,
clever children.
Yeah. The oldest one, Joe, has in fact, both the 2 boys are at Northwestern University in Chicago. The oldest one studying film, because since about the age of 4,
I remember.
he's wanted to be a film director, and he's been
Amazing. My admiration to that boy.
bossing
I
ar-
saw him on day 1 he was born. It's so
Yeah.
sweet.
and Benji's studying engineering. The daughter wants to follow in her grandfather's footsteps and become a medical person, but
Glenn,
she wants to be a surgeon, and that's what her heart is set on. And she's been going to sort of little attachments and what do you call them, camps for budding surgeons and goodness knows what. And Zoe just likes to be
she's
beautiful.
pretty. She's so beautiful. She is indeed.
And I think she will exploit. Actually, she's very good at sewing, seamstress. So I think she'll probably be in that sort of reign, or a model or something. Anyway,
Something good.
but they're lovely.
And then for you to see us, you came to Brazil, which is another 12 hours flight direct to São Paulo, and then
Sao
plus
Paulo and then up to Guyana.
South
Yes,
Guyana,
it's,
which is a big airport there. You need to
yeah.
really have a marathon to walk to.
Well, actually, I mean, in fact, I suppose we're both good travellers, but in my sort of working life, I spent a lot of time on long haul flights, and so I got quite used to it, and I find myself able to have a meal, and I must admit, a glass of wine, and then just get my head down and go to sleep.
Lovely.
Judy just watches movies all night, but that's what she wants
But
to
we
do.
are very grateful you made the effort to come, because you came to celebrate your youngest granddaughter, which is Jemimah Joy. She just turned 15, so your youngest granddaughter is already 15.
Mhm.
And your daughter-in-law who is 50.
Yes.
Yes.
Scary, really.
It's scary. It's pretty scary.
Yeah.
But we were very grateful. I really appreciate your words. I really actually want to find out where the video is, because it was very touching what you told me on my birthday party.
All right.
Yes, very special. Thank you very much. And to try to close it here, is there anything else that comes to your mind, or a memory that you would like to leave here for us, or a message to somebody, or even an event that maybe we didn't mention but would be nice to
Do you know, on reflection, you haven't given me much chance to think about it, but one of the things I actually do think about is the fact that although my parents split up, and my mother married, first of all, a guy called Eric, who was an Irishman, who I loved dearly. He was a really lovely guy, but he disappeared one day, and we never really knew where he'd gone. My mother did, but us children never knew. And then she married another guy, and that was a total disaster, so we decamped from him. But people would say, well, you know, you must have turned out to be really complex character, you know, mental issues, left, right,
because
center.
you didn't have like a father figure in your childhood or something like that.
And I don't think I did. Well, I mean, other people may judge and may think I'm a bit peculiar, but we had a very happy childhood. We spent a lot, well, we had quite a lot of it at school, and in the holidays, we were always on horses doing something or other, hunting or gymkhanas or whatever. And my mother was a very good mother, a very good English cook.
Wonderful.
We had a good routine when we were at home on holidays. In other words, you had your breakfast about 8 o'clock, then you disappeared from the house. And in those days, we could sort of go off on our bicycles or on our horses or whatever. And provided we were back home for lunch at 1:45, and then back, I suppose, at about 6 o'clock for supper.
Wonderful.
Nobody much cared, and I don't think we got into any trouble as a result either. And so I had a very happy childhood. Yes, like all children, you have moments of drama, but goodness sake, I've been very fortunate in my life.
Wonderful. Thank you for being Mr. Anthony Julian Stevens. Just you, as you say, just me, but you are the general of the British Army.
Was.
Yeah, but you always be in our hearts.
Okay.
We didn't talk much about that, but we will have part 2 sometime. Okay? So, yes, do you want to say any message to your children or grandchildren or anyone?
Hi, kids. If you dare watch this, I hope you won't judge me too harshly.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.